Welcome to the Humans and Earth podcast. We bring you inspiration and practical resources for healing our planet and ourselves. It is time for soulful contributions that regenerate life on Earth.
I'm Helen Claire Harmon, a thought leader and teacher who believes we're ready to renew Earth and heal ourselves in the process. Welcome to today's episode. Welcome to the Humans and Earth podcast. I am so delighted today to talk with Stephan Harding Ph.D., an ecologist, one of the founders of Schumacher College, a faculty member and the resident ecologist at the college, and the author of Animate Earth, Science, Intuition, and Gaia. As you all can tell, it's a book that I like very much. I continue to have marks and notations in it. Stephan is also the creator of the app Deep Time Walk. Stephan holds degrees from the University of Durham and Oxford University and has conducted research in Venezuela, Costa Rica, and the UK. Before we begin, I want to tell you just a little bit about some of Stephan's core ideas. Stephan understands Earth or Gaia as an organism whose systems and interrelationships we can understand both scientifically and intuitively. We need a loving relationship with Gaia in order to restore her and ourselves, and we need to switch from control to awe, he explains. He advocates that we view ourselves as participants in a cosmos suffused with intelligence, beauty, intrinsic value, and profound meaning. His concept of holistic science reveals how we can approach the natural world through not only a scientific lens as typically understood, but also the lenses of intuition, feeling, and sensing. Welcome, Stephan. It is such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's lovely to be here. I thought perhaps I'd just play a bit of music to begin with, which is a cuatro from Venezuela, where I was born. And this is just a bit of sort of some Venezuelan music, just to set the tone.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think you did a lovely introduction. I haven't got much to add. Maybe we should go right into the questions. What do you think?
Yes. So, as I mentioned to you before we met today, I wanted to start with this kind of broad question that I think will let listeners get a sense of your contribution, which is, if you're speaking to people who want to contribute to regeneration for Earth and humanity, what do you believe are the most important things for us to know and do now?
That's a great question. I was thinking about your question earlier. And my conclusion is that the most important thing for us to know is that there is a deep center to the psyche, to ourselves, to nature. There's a mysterious deep center. I mean, you can't find it anywhere, but it's a center nonetheless. You can find it in yourself somehow. And that center is connected to Gaia, to our planet, to the universe, to the materiality of things, and that actually it is Gaia in some way. Now, that's quite a thing to work towards knowing. I mean, it's not something you can know straight away. It's something you cultivate that sort of knowing. Jung called it the self, in Jungian psychology, which I really love. I find Jungian psychology really helpful for us. It could really help us a lot. More than we've discovered. He called it the self with a capital S. My friend Arne Næss, the great Norwegian philosopher who coined the term deep ecology, he called it the ecological self. And the alchemists called it the philosopher's stone. In Buddhism, it's called the Buddha nature. It's there. And once you have that sort of knowledge, which you can't describe, then that naturally leads you in towards a lifestyle that is ecological, that's good for you and good for the earth, you naturally follow the promptings of this center that's helping you to move forwards in your life into a more ecological direction, which is good for you, good for your neighbors, good for the planet, good for the whole. This is the sort of the knowledge I'm talking about, of the center, which Jung called the self. And you get synchronicities happening, you know, coincidences start happening that help you. And you find you're living a happier, calmer life. And this knowledge helps you to realize that you have to live a simple life. And simplicity is very important. I mean, Gaia needs us to be humble and simple. So I don't know, can't remember who it was who coined the term simple in means, rich in ends. Simple in means, rich in ends. I think this may have been my friend Arne Ness, I'm not sure. Simple in means, rich in ends. So in other words, I have what I need. I have what I need. I have a nice place to live, and I live humbly. I don't consume very much, but boy, am I rich in myself, because I've got great neighbors with whom I make music and gardening and go on walks in the wild, and I have things to read, I have things to make, I'm cooking, I'm gardening, I'm doing all sorts of things all at once in my community, and I'm contributing to my communities. I'm growing community as well as growing vegetables and growing wilderness. I'm growing community, and everything seems to conspire to help me in some way. There are always difficulties, of course, in life, but somehow this connection with the center helps you through those difficulties, helps you grow through those difficulties. And apparently they say eventually, I mean, the Chinese alchemists would say, you reach the point where you don't have any worries anymore. You're just so, your knowledge has increased so much that you don't have any worries anymore. And I think that's when you've really, I don't know what the word is, when you've really discovered the knowledge, the valuable knowledge, which you can't put into words. So to do with the center, what do we, the most important thing to know is there is a deep center in ourselves and in nature, the self, the philosopher's stone, etc. And we can cultivate, we can allow that to grow in us, and that's what makes us happy and what helps nature.
Yes, and I hear you articulating that this is expressed through a simple life, through community and connection to self, to nature, earth, to other people. And as you've noted, the mystics and wise people of the world's great wisdom traditions have all spoken to this.
Mm-hmm.
How do you tell your students or anyone you're talking with how to find this? If they understand the general concept that you just laid out, but it's not something they're living, and you described a little bit of what it looks like when you live it, that you're gardening, you're cooking, you're in relationship with people, with neighbors, community. But what do you think is an entry point for someone who says, I get that that is true and beautiful, and I want to experience that, but I'm not sure where to begin?
Okay, that's a lovely question. Really lovely question. Yeah, thank you. Lovely. I would say you can begin two places. One you could call from the inside, the other you could call from the outside, if you want to use inside and outside. And they sort of eat their way towards each other and meet. You want them to meet like two little earthworms or moles burrowing in the ground, in the soil. You want them to meet. When they meet, that's when something wonderful happens, right? So one of the moles, the inner, let's say the mole of the inner life, well, I would suggest pay attention to your dreams. Start paying attention to your dreams. I mean, I've been doing that for quite a while now, and occasionally I get the most fascinating dream that really helps me an awful lot, if I know how to interpret it, what to do with it. So you don't just write down your dreams; you cultivate the sort of intuitive knowledge of what they mean. And when you get to the point where you're convinced they really do mean something, and you don't buy this stuff from my fellow scientists that is just recapitulating the day, or well, it probably is that, but there's a deeper meaning in dreams, much deeper than that, which is connected with this center. In fact, it's the center. You could say it's the self that's sending you the dreams, so you can make your way towards the self. if you have that attitude to the dreams, then they start becoming very helpful. Not just interesting, but helpful. Your life you get some insight into your life and into what life is. It's amazing. And you're amazed that the inner world, if you like, can open up such possibilities of discovery through this route. And on the outer, so-called outer side, it's very important for me anyway, and I can only speak for myself, to have a Gaia place, to have a place in nature, very close to my house, or something maybe in my house, where I can just go to be with Gaia, let's say, where I can just go and just be and look and listen and look at the colors of the leaves, just to look at what's happening with the birds. What are the birds up to today? Ah, look, there's a robin coming along and singing. That robin has a life of its own, extraordinary. It's living this life in this jungle right next to my house, a whole life. In fact, there are billions of lives being lived all around me by bacteria in the soil, by fungi in the roots of plants, by the plants themselves. You know, there are even bacteria in the clouds. You know, they're riding in the clouds, deciding when it rains. This is all going on right now around me. Wow. And all of this is connected to that self, that center, and to my dreams in some way. I can't really understand, but goodness gracious, just contemplating all of this creates a very healthy psychological brew. It's good for one's mental health. It really helps one's mental health, and it helps one's community, and it's all rooted in nature. The dreams come from nature, and physical nature is nature. It's all nature, it's all Gaia, it's all connection with the earth, with Gaia. That's the key. That's what we've been missing in our culture for 400 years, a deep, non-hippie-ish or hippie-ish, but empirical knowledge of what it means to be connected to the earth, to Gaia.
Yes. It means the world to me to hear you as a scientist express that. As you know, I am an academic also, and we're both aware that this language that you and other colleagues such as Arnie Ness and people here in the US, also scientists like Mark Beckoff and Wes Jackson, this language and expression that you all have been willing to bring forth really just in the last few decades, I think is tremendously important. And I'd like to specifically focus now on the way that you and others have been willing to articulate that when those of us who want to connect intuitively, emotionally, or spiritually with animals, plants, or Gaia, that is not an anti-intellectual endeavor, right? As you and I both know, the prevailing claim in the West and in the industrialized world for the last, let's say, 100 to 400 years, depending where you are on the planet, has been that it is unintellectual or irrational to connect intuitively, spiritually, emotionally to nature or Gaia. And I think one of the most important contributions of your work is your articulation that these approaches to the living world, in fact, are valid. Can you speak about that for our audience?
Yeah, another lovely question. Thank you. Well, I was thinking about this too. I was feeling my way into it. You know, the thing is, when you find that animals bring out your good emotions, you know, when you, for example, today a friend of mine showed me her cat, you know, a beautiful cat. I felt so good when I was seeing that cat. You know, it's lovely to see the cat. That's a good emotion. And the animal brought that for me, right? So we note that. I note that as a scientist. When I saw the cat, I felt good. Therefore, it's a good thing. It's good to feel good. The animal actually helped me do that by being a cat. It's not that I projected onto the cat. The cat actually is a cat, and it, you know, its inner nature reached me, and it touched me. I mean, how could you deny that as a human being with a heart? How could you not deny that? I mean, you deny that, you're hurting yourself as well as hurting the world. So that's what we've done with our, I'm afraid to say, in our science. And well, I'm a scientist and I love science. But we do treat the world like it doesn't have any, that it's dead, a machine. I mean, it's a trite thing to say, but we do. Well, that's wrong, because it makes you feel awful, right? When I think of that, I feel awful. When I think of the cat as a cat and the quality of the cat and the liveness and the you know, the way it looked at me and the quality of the character of that cat, it makes me feel good. And there's something real. It's real what I saw. So animals bring out our good emotions. And also, you know, we also find that we do have a spiritual aspect to ourselves. You know, there is something, there's nothing, actually it's something very noble when we try to understand life and what's going on in life. And, you know, we try to get a vision of how we can really contribute to the unfolding of life in a really good way. That's what I would call spiritual. You know, it's having a sort of vision of some sense of where all this is going, where it could go, how it could turn out really well for us and for Gaia, for our planet. You know, have a sense of that, and you give yourself to that. You build your life around that sort of feeling, that idea. I would call that spiritual. I mean, that's also really good for me. So what's wrong with being spiritual? It's good for my mental health. Being spiritual gives me meaning in my life. It's good for my mental health. I'm a happier person. I have fewer doctor's bills. I don't bother the health service. You know, I'm useful in the community. I mean, it's good. I mean, who could not want that? Who could not want to promote that for the benefit of humanity? It should be on the National Health Service, how to be spiritual. Then, intuitive. Well, when I'm intuitive, you know, my life becomes much richer. Like I was saying about the dreams, you know, the dreams start making sense to me. Things sort of make sense to me, or ideas come to me, which I'm unbidden in a way, or I get an inspiration and I start doing something, even if it's converting my garden shed or doing some gardening. I don't know, I feel a strange connection with something very meaningful. It's very close to being spiritual, really. And then in short, if you become more if you recognize your emotions, that they're valid, that they're important and they're real, you recognize that you are spiritual and that you have intuition and you have feeling and you have sensing and things, then your life and thinking as well, you're thinking too. You see, the intellect is there too. In fact, the intellect is enriched by all of this because you have much better ideas when you're connected with your feelings. And you're embedded in Gaia, your ideas become really interesting. In fact, the most interesting ideas come from that place. That's where Einstein got his ideas. That's where Newton got his ideas from, because they were so deeply connected in the cosmos. Because they were spiritual and emotional and intuitive, you know, that's where the best science comes from. I'd like to tell my scientific colleagues, that's where you want really good ideas, going to be great for your career. Cultivate your emotional life, your spiritual life, your intuitive life, and then you'll get great ideas. And my last thing is, who would want to just put up with a mere intellectual stance, you know, that emotions don't matter? That's the intellect dominating too much, and it basically stunts your development as a person. Well, all right, I'm sorry, that's a bit strong. I should say it stunted my development as a person. I can't speak for anyone else, but it stunted my development for sure. I can see in myself how that kind of education I had as a scientist, that emotions and intuitions are not very welcome when you're doing science in some sense. That damaged me. I can see it in myself, and I can see how to get around it. You know, that's all I'm saying. And then you become more whole and you become happier if you acknowledge that the human being is a multivariate organism. We're a multivariate statistic. We haven't just got thinking, you know, we've got our sensing, our feeling, our intuition, our emotions, everything you mentioned. And we need to feel all those I need to feel all of those in relation to Gaia. When I feel them in relation to Gaia and my life in Gaia, then I feel really happy. Those are my happiest moments. And I think it's true for many. It's not just for me, it's true for humanity as a whole. I think I can say that with a little bit of confidence. It's not just good for me. It's you know, we are nature, so nature has to be good for us.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. Nature is good for you. It's as simple as that. Let's find out how good she can be. There's an infinite amount of discovery of how good nature is for you. Infinite amount.
Yes.
Mm.
So sometimes you speak of these ideas in terms of holistic science or in terms of animism and the new animism. for our listeners who haven't read Animate Earth, it might be nice if you would define how you understand new animism. And then I'm curious to hear, what's your viewpoint at this time about how we can continue bringing these ideas into industrialized cultures that abandoned them in favor of the mechanistic view of the world that you've named? You and I know, and many people do now, that we have piles of evidence in favor of everything you've just said. We have medical evidence, in fact, in favor of the things that you've said. And then we have the whole bodies of wisdom literature and wisdom traditions from all over the world. So obviously you're making your contribution through writing and teaching and your app. And yet I would just like to also hear you reflect more on, how do you see holistic scientific or new animist ideas penetrating into the world, and how can we all keep contributing to that spread? But maybe first just define your sense of new animism.
Okay, thank you. I would say for me, new animism is the understanding that what we know as atoms and molecules and electrons and protons and neutrons and quarks and all of those subatomic particles in physics through our science, they're actually, that they exist, and they're actually forms of awareness, I would say. There's some strange form of awareness. In other words, there's a very strong relationship between awareness, energy, and matter. Those three things, awareness, energy, matter, are actually one thing. In other words, everything has some kind of inner experience. There's always an inner experience of what it's like, or what it is to be a photon or an electron, even though we think of photons and electrons as little billiard balls, but of course they're not. They're distributed everywhere, and they come in and out of existence. So they're very mysterious. But whatever's going on with them when they come in and out of existence, whether they're a particle or a wave, there's always an experience associated with it. And then when those atoms and molecules organize themselves, almost miraculously, into living organisms like ourselves, but also the earthworms and, well, first of all, the bacteria, and then, forward from the bacteria, so to speak, to all the other animals, multicellular organisms like us. That awareness feels itself in different bodies. It sort of experiences itself in different forms. It feels what it's like to be an earthworm form, what it's like to be a wasp form, or a koala bear form. And then eventually in us, we feel what it's like to be, it feels what it's like to be in a human form. So the awareness belongs to nature, and we're given a fair slug of it. We've got a fair good slug of awareness. And our job really is to give that awareness back to Gaia by becoming aware of her, by becoming aware of that she is sacred, that she's this planet, and with all her biodiversity, is a miracle. It's a gem in space. It's a miracle. And we adore it. We adore her. And we're not afraid to adore her. As a scientist, that makes you a better scientist. So I hope I didn't ramble too much with that one.
No, I think that was really helpful. And it connects back, in fact, to what you said earlier about the importance of having your own Gaia place, because whether you have a space on your balcony or in your own yard or garden or in a park or indoors if the weather is fierce, that's the place where you can practice this awareness of Gaia, and the awareness, as you said, I think really beautifully, of oneself as an expression of Gaia and the natural world and life.
Yeah, that's good. And one thing I would add to might help people, it's something that helped me a lot, was when you're in your Gaia place, as you say, whether it's out in your garden or out in nature, in the woods or somewhere like that, or even on your own balcony, or even in your apartment these days, with some plants around you. I think it's very important to offer the place some kind of art. So maybe you're in your Gaia place in your garden, and you see a few sticks and a few maybe fallen flowers or a few stones. you look at those and you think, God, if it grabs you, God, aren't they beautiful, those things? And then you arrange them as a kind of offering to your Gaia place. You know, you give it to your, look, this, you're so beautiful. I've made this for you. So here, please see this, something like that. And then you notice what happens in your consciousness when you do that. You know, so I think that's for me, that's been very helpful. I only discovered this quite recently, actually. It's about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, I discovered this. And it's really interesting what happens. It doesn't happen every time, but sometimes there's a tremendous peace that descends. A real peace. It's beautiful, it's the sort of peace we're all looking for. And we all have a right to as human beings. It's our basic, fundamental human right to feel ecological peace.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and making an offering like that is not only an expression of gratitude for the gifts that we are receiving literally every millisecond from Gaia, right? The oxygen, for one thing, and the sunlight and the food and the water and literally everything that supports our lives. But I hear too, when you make an offering of that sort, it's an inaction of your reciprocal relationship, right? Recognizing I am continually receiving from Gaia, and also I make a return to Gaia.
Oh, that's a lovely way of putting it. Yeah. I think you may have hit the nail on the head, actually. That the perception you have is that Gaia is keeping you alive, that you're only alive because of her. You're only here because of her. I mean, if she hadn't evolved over the last 4,000, nearly 600 million years of evolution on the planet, as planetary evolution, we wouldn't be here. So, of course, we're going to be grateful to her for that. And of course, we're going to honor her and say, what an amazing achievement you've done, you know, to have kept yourself going like this, always throwing forth new creative ideas in the morphology of organisms, you know, the shapes of organisms and the forms of plants, the forms of animals, always throwing forth amazing creativity with colors and, you know, shapes are incredible. I mean, just think of coral reefs and tropical butterflies, you know, unbelievable. So of course we're going to honor that. I mean, you're not really human until you can, well, we're not really human until we can do that, you know. I mean, that's when I think when you do that, you feel your real humanity. That's when the deeper humanity comes forth. Mm-hmm. And in some strange way, Gaia is involved in that process too. As you said, it's not you, it's you and Gaia.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this conversation is growing in academic circles and higher ed. I don't know how quickly it's growing, but it is growing. And that's quite important. I think it's really important what people learn if they experience higher education.
Yes.
But of course, the more urgent question is how to spread awareness of these ideas outside of academia and higher ed.
Yeah.
And I suppose there are many writers and thought leaders and activist groups working on that, but I'm curious about your thoughts on how to bring these types of awareness into the larger culture of humanity.
Well, that's a great question. It's not easy because the general culture, as you know, is consumerist and materialist. I mean, hyper-materialist. So it's not easy. I think we have to go for very simple things, maybe, but very deep. Simple but deep. So the Gaia place, I think, is very deep and simple. Can we say to people, you know, who are stressed out, especially after the virus, you know, it's made us all be a bit more introspective, which I think we need. We're far too extroverted a culture. We need more introspection in the culture. So the virus has forced us to be introspective during lockdown. So, you know, well, then go and spend some time in your Gaia place. You're in lockdown now. Okay, it's not great, but make yourself a Gaia place in your corner of your apartment. You know, get some plants, even some stones or something from Gaia, and you just go there. And you've got all this time on your hands now. You've got nothing to lose. You just go there and you sit there, and you just look at the stones or look at the branches, whatever you have. You just sit there and just be with it, and realize these stones, these little branches, they have something to tell me. They have something to tell me. I just have to sort of wait until I've calmed down enough so that I can hear what they have to tell me. And then, it's a sort of sense of beauty, really, of how beautiful they are, how beautiful they really are. And that's all. And you just cultivate that. Just go back there the next day and do the same. Can I find the same beauty? How is it today? Oh, today wasn't so good. I didn't find it today. All right, never mind. And just keep going back to your Gaia place over and over and over again, gently, without forcing yourself. Just sometimes you have to sort of make yourself do it. But, just spend time, and then you'll see what happens. I mean, I think it's really fantastic. You'll find Gaia, and then your life will be different, very different. You'll have a much happier life. We'll all have a much happier life. So I think if I were to suggest something to the general, to my culture at this time, I would say, everybody, please spend 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day with your Gaia place, wherever it is, in your flat, outside, in your backyard, wherever. Just start with 5 minutes a day. Just be looking there. Just be. Slow down as much as you can. I know it's difficult, but now with lockdown, we're learning how to slow down, which we need. We need to slow down and just look. And I think that everything could start from that. That could be the start of something, a tremendous development in the person, personally, and psychologically. A tremendous development could happen starting like that. The sort of development that if everybody had, we would have a real ecological society. We wouldn't have these problems we have now. We have a society really in tune with Gaia, because we will all have developed as much as we possibly can in that way.
Yes, because it seems that we're realizing at a deeper level that sustainability, which I tend to think is an outmoded term, and you may agree, we're really looking for something so much deeper, like regeneration. But whatever term you like, in order for us to achieve something meaningful in restoring the earth and human well-being and our relationship to the earth, it has to be a relational process, right? We've spent a few decades emphasizing reduce, reuse, recycle, and that's good, but it's so superficial. And arguably the reason that we haven't made massive progress with handling climate change is we're not spending enough time on this relational piece. Because how can you care about and tend the well-being of something or someone if you're not in relationship with that being? So I hear you, and I agree with you. I think, as simple as it sounds, spending time daily in one's Gaia place could be really transformative for the human species.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, I agree with you entirely. Yeah, I think it could be. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's such a simple thing, but it can be very. I found it transformative for myself. That's for sure. That's what I can say from my own experience. These are things you have to experience. The Buddha said, "Don't believe a word I say. Just try it out for yourself." I think that's a very important attitude. That's a proper scientific attitude. You see, for me. Okay, I'm not doing science or the sort of measurement style science, which anyone can do. It's not that kind of science. It's more using my own judgment as the empirical yardstick, if you like, and cultivating my ability to have that judgment and noticing the changes it makes in me. That's the empirical scientific attitude, which yes. I think Jung had that. Anyway, sorry, we're going off track. Yeah, beg your pardon.
No, testing through experience. I think that's really important. And when you see the ways in which industrialized cultures have separated ourselves from an experience of Gaia, it makes perfect sense that we've been abusive to Gaia because we're not having an experience of nature.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to, no, you know, it's easy and it's not easy. I mean, if you're very disturbed, of course, it's not easy. But nature nearly always has a curative effect. You know, it's very, very curative. If people go for a walk in nature, I mean, some psychotherapists now don't see their clients in consulting rooms. They go out into the woods. I mean, at least one of my friends, the psychotherapist, does that. I know two of my friends now. I mean, that's really great. And it really helps people a lot. Nature is great for our mental health.
Yes.
I mean, Gaia is the ultimate cure, actually, you could say, to all, almost you could say to all our ills. I know it's an exaggeration, but if you're really, you know, in tune with and in love with the planet, with plants, with animals, with the atmosphere, and you love seeing them, then of course that's going to affect your biochemistry. It's going to affect, there'll be chemical changes in your body that will be passed on from that consciousness, you know, because it's all, as you know, matter and psyche are totally interconnected. I mean, they are the same thing. And so you will be healthy, you will be healthier. There's no question about it.
Yes. And I think we're in an exciting time when we are actually starting to measure that. So we're moving out of, oh, that sounds like a fantastical claim, to you can put people in nature and then measure their stress hormone levels. I know some of those tests have been done, maybe in Japan. My sense is the Japanese scientists may be leaders in that, but we can establish this with scientific markers for those who want that kind of evidence.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, I think it's great to have that kind of evidence. I mean, you know, the intellect needs to be convinced. And the problem is it's hard to convince the intellect, because the intellect always says, oh, you had that experience. You know, how do you know that you didn't sort of make it up? Or how do you know? How do you know? And in a way, it's a fair question, and it sort of undermines. If you let it take over, it can undermine your experience, and you end up nowhere again with just the intellect in control, which is not good, not a healthy place to be. But if the intellect is convinced by the data, you know, I see the graphs, and I read the study in a peer-reviewed journal. I think, okay, I may not understand how this works, but it works. I mean, the fact is, there's the evidence. It works. You see, that's the intellect getting involved. That works. That's really interesting. Okay, so now my next step, if I've got a real scientific attitude, my next step is to try it on myself. Then I'm being a really good scientist. Yeah, that's what a scientist should be. It should be like that. I try it on myself, and I have been trying it on myself, and it's really, really, really good. And I would recommend it to everybody. It's really great. I've been tremendously healed by this process myself.
So it sounds like where our conversation has gone so far is recognizing that our solutions lie in connection, and amazingly, our solutions lie in evidence. Although our scientific revolution has allowed us to create tremendous environmental problems and tremendous separation from Gaia. One thing I was thinking as you were talking just now that is exciting is that rationally trained people are open to being convinced by evidence, as you said. And so ideally, everyone is moving forward both with connection to Gaia and with looking at the evidence of why that matters. But we do wondrously have these two pathways that both can carry us forward potentially into an amazing regenerative future.
Yeah. So here's an alchemical image, you know, of that. You know, it's the caduceus of Hermes, of course. You know, there's two snakes, two different kinds of knowledge, which are to do with the earth. I mean, you know, the snakes are to do with the earth. They go up the caduceus in relationship. So one would be the evidence-based knowledge, the scientific knowledge you talked about. The other is the intuitive, experiential knowledge. They go like this. They reach the top of the caduceus, and then often what happens, you get a pair of wings. or you get a wing, you get wings of some sort, you get a winged helmet. You see, this is a very helpful from the unconscious. Can you see? It's sort of giving you a hint of what it is when you've done that in yourself, when you've managed to bring those two things together in yourself. You get you get freedom, basically. You get a sort of freedom perspective. You get something very, very valuable indeed.
Yes, and for those who meditate, from what I understand, those two serpents intertwined also represent the masculine and feminine energies rising in a Kundalini meditation up the spine, right? So we have multiple global harmonious interpretations of what that symbol can indicate.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has to work out what it means for themselves, but that's how I agree. It's the masculine and the feminine. The masculine, of course, is the intellect. The feminine is the intuition, to put it very simply. We need them both in order to be. I think what becomes free at the top, when the two wings come, is you're free to see. You're free to have more of an understanding of what you're seeing, what it means. It gives you freedom to see, to understand more, to feel more connected, and have more sense of connection and what that connection means. It's very rewarding. I mean, really, I think every person wants this kind of thing. I mean, the self, it's the development towards the self. The self wants this. I think the universe wants it. I think that's what Gaia is about. Gaia needs us, I would say, being completely unscientific. My scientific colleagues would be horrified to hear me say this, but I'm sorry, I have to say it. I think Gaia somehow needs us to develop our Gaian consciousness so that we can become part of this great planet. It needs one of the most amazing intelligences it's ever evolved out of herself to be at one with herself. I mean, that would be a great fulfillment for her. Can you imagine? It's like a lost child coming home, Beautiful possibilities.
Yes, right.
I know, it's very poetic. Yes, it's the imagination. It's imagination, as Blake would say. We don't value it enough. We think it's just sort of charming or, nice poetry, but it's not the way things really are. But what we discover is that, actually, this is the way things really are, as well as being amenable to science, which, of course, is beautiful. You don't want to throw away the science. You need the science, like you said. It's part of it. It's not in opposition to it. It's part of it. Yeah, the science fits in beautifully. Of course, I'd want to do some controlled experiments sometimes to figure out how I should relate to these materials. Of course, I'd want to do that, or whether sitting in your Gaia spot is good for you. Yeah, of course, let's do the science, of course. No conflict whatsoever.
Yes, beautiful. And let me just mark, okay, some of your scientific colleagues might be horrified by that, but we have made tremendous progress given that it would be difficult now to count the number of scientists like you who are expressing these kinds of ideas. There are many of you, perhaps still a minority, but many of you, and that's very exciting.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. That's really good. I know some of the young scientists I've met her like that, which is really good. And some of the older ones, but it's mostly some of the younger ones these days, which is really nice to see.
So what are you working on now? I know Animate Earth is a few years old. Tell us what's occupying you currently.
Well, I've just finished writing a new book called Gaia Alchemy, which I've spent the last 2 years or 2.5 years working on. And it's a very difficult thing to do. But what I'm trying to do is look at the science, take the science of Gaia, about carbon atoms and climate regulation, all of those things from the science, which I'm very familiar with, and look at those things, those processes, in the light of alchemical processes, which were there before science and which science rejected, but which we now know have tremendous psychological validity from the work of Jung. We now have tremendous psychological validity. So in other words, it fosters our self-realization. It fosters our move towards the self that we were talking about. That's what alchemy does. We've discovered, Jung discovered. Can I put that together with the science of Gaia So the atoms and the molecules of Gaia, and the organisms and the rocks and the atmosphere and the waters and the whole churning mass of planetary life, it actually becomes, I understand it like some kind of alchemical vessel, or it's there's an alchemical process going on in the earth, which is the same as my alchemical process in some way. And so therefore it helps me to connect with the earth or with Gaia even more deeply. It's something like that. But I mean, it's such a strange exploration to be doing that. It's not easy, it's difficult. And I feel it's something very much for the future, this sort of development of psyche and science, if you like, coming together. Because they were separated 400 years ago during the scientific revolution.
Yes.
Partly by the brilliance of Descartes, and his ability to convince people, and he's a brilliant thinker, very convincing. And he didn't mean to do all that harm, but unfortunately it has done a lot of harm, a lot. He'd be horrified to see what harm it's done. I'm sure he would be. And so we need to heal that problem. And I think this is one way for me. I found it very valuable for myself. And I've just been teaching an online course in Brazil with scholar Schumacher Brazil, with 17 folks. In fact, I'm going to see them for the closing circle in a little while today. And they found it very valuable too, working in this sort of way with alchemy and with Gaia.
Yes.
Or rather, to be more specific, with a specific alchemical image. We chose a specific alchemical image. And I do that in the book. I have just two major alchemical, or three major alchemical images, and I explore those images in relation to the science of Gaia. And we just see what comes out. And it's been, it's very nice, I must say. It generates a very good feeling, a very good sense of being in the world. More enhanced sense of being in the world, and knowing what my role is and what I should be doing, and what, who this person is and who that person is. And when I see an insect on the ground, I'm more motivated to have a really good look at it and spend some time with it, and really absorb the details of its color and its shape. It becomes like that. It's sort of like that. That's how I would describe it. The world starts opening out for you in a beautiful way. It's flowers. It's a sort of flowering. And I think that's what everyone's looking for, really, deep down. It's not the new smartphone or the new car. It's that flowering, or inward flowering into Gaia, or into whatever you want to call it. But it's a sort of flowering into wholeness or into Gaia. I think that's what people really, really want.
Yes, I agree. And it sounds from what you're describing that it's a process of experiencing the world through all of one's capacities.
Exactly. That's right. That's exactly right. That's why it's called wholeness, being whole, because you're using as much as one's able to, I mean, there's always bits that you can't develop quite so much, or you can't deal with so much, but it's just, being more all-rounded, being whole, that's it. Yes. But part of that wholeness, you see, I think we've always thought the wholeness is just in ourselves. But it is, but only if we realize it's the wholeness of Gaia, that without the wholeness of Gaia, without Gaia being whole, without this planet being healthy, we cannot be healthy ourselves. We can't experience the ultimate levels, or even intermediate levels, of really good health, unless our ecosystem, our local bioregion, our planet is healthy.
Yes, and I think that's the tragedy and the potential of our 19th and 20th century experiments with control and industrialization and environmental devastation, is that we have learned now, we have overwhelming evidence that you cannot have well people on a sick planet. And that's inspiring to me, because even if people only engage in Earth restoration for reasons of enlightened self-interest, that's great, right? There's so much potential there for people who simply realize, oh, I would like to not have asthma, we need to take care of the air, or I would like my children or grandchildren to be able to play in a place with living plants and healthy soil, or in order for me to cure some health problems, I'm going to need to switch to eating living food, which is grown in a living regenerative way. There's tremendous potential there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Beautiful examples you gave. That's exactly right. You sort of, I like what you said, because you were painting a very wholesome life, weren't you? With wholesomeness going on in many different aspects of one's life. That's what you created there. And I think it's like that. I mean, for me, it's partly my human community. I need to have a good human community that I can contribute to. Then I need to be connected to my biological community, but the wild plants, the wild animals, as well as the domesticated ones, but really, really, really the wild ones, especially give them some real special attention, because boy, we've treated them very badly. We love our domestic animals and our domestic plants, as we should, but we need to love the wild ones just as much, and realize what they have to teach us, which the domestic ones don't have to teach us. And yeah, it's a process of, I suppose, again, it's very trite, isn't it? But you start feeling more love. You start falling in love with Gaia.
Yes.
It's. I mean, it sounds. I know it's very corny. I know it's very corny. It is, but maybe.
Well, I don't think it is. I think it runs the risk of being misinterpreted that way. But perhaps the only way to defend that important interpretation and experience is that we simply keep talking about it, and we do it with depth. I mean, it's not a greeting card phrase. It's not a social media meme, but we need to just keep discussing it and defending its depth so that people realize it's not corny at all.
Oh, Helen, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. That helps me a lot. Because the last thing I want to be is corny or be perceived as corny. That doesn't help. So yeah, that's very good. What you said is very, very helpful. Yeah, It is very deep, and it is very healing, and we need to defend it for the benefit of all beings, like the Buddhists say. Basically, we do.
Yes.
It's not just for our benefit, for the benefit of all beings, all being everywhere. I mean, that's what it's for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stephan, it's been such a delight to talk with you today. I have enormous respect for your work and your contribution. And as we move toward a close of our conversation, I would love to hear you say anything in closing that you want to say about what you personally imagine life might be like on a restored planet. What do you think we might want to joyfully anticipate in order to motivate ourselves to do the regenerative work that is needed now?
Well, what comes to my mind is a rich, healthy, interconnected biodiversity, lots of biodiversity interconnected, with biodiversity corridors linking huge reserves of biodiversity. Yeah, there might be forests, or there might be even ocean areas of the ocean or areas of the desert, but corridors linking huge, massive areas of biodiversity with very small human settlements in between. You know, in the sort of the holes in between. Where there we have, of course, our food crops and our animals and whatever we have, but surrounded by this fantastic biodiversity. So, you know, if after a while the village life, I feel I need to be away from it for a while, I pick up my stuff, I walk into one of the corridors, and I know I just keep walking through the corridors and following my map, I'll get into this fantastic wilderness, and I can be there for days. Or I can be in the community and I can join in with growing the food and the ceremonies, and all around me there's wild, you know, and not far away I can see the forest, or I can see the wild area. I can see it. It's always present for me, always. Everywhere I look, I see a bit of it. Everywhere, all 360 degrees. It might be far away, you know, quite far, maybe, I don't know, a kilometer, maybe even 2 kilometers or more, but I can see it. And then I have a relationship with it all the time. I can see birds flying over from it. I know that pest controlling organisms come in from there to help control what we call pests on our crops, which are growing organically. You know, I have a relationship with that. And then in some of these, there'll be beautiful little cities, maybe, like the center of Seville or the center of Oxford or the center of Cambridge, places like that, or anywhere, but with local vernacular, of course. And everyone will be pursuing this quest for Gaia and with Gaia. Now, that's as far as I can go. I know it's very idealistic, but basically, we'd keep the vision of our human realization alongside and in support of Gaia's own far vaster self-realization as a great planetary body or psyche. I just wrote that before we started because I wanted to try and get some thoughts about what you asked me. So keep the vision of our human realization alongside and in support of Gaia's own far vaster self-realization as a great planetary body / psyche. Something like that.
It's wonderful. Wonderful. Relational, healthy, sane, joyful, and maybe not so very idealistic. We do have preliminary contemporary models of that, right? With things like the Transition Towns movement. So I hope that before too long, we will see more and more manifestations of that vision.
Yeah, that's what we need to work towards. Absolutely. Yeah. Peacefully, democratically, Arne would say.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Stephan. What a pleasure to speak with you. I'm really grateful for your time. To all of our listeners today, if you would like more from Humans and Earth, follow us on social media or at humansandearth.com. Humans and Earth, heal Earth, let Earth heal.
Thank you for listening to Humans and Earth. Please share this episode to broaden engagement in the regeneration our world needs. You'll find social media links in the show notes. To explore our other offerings, visit www.humansandearth.com.